Phil Lawrence, co-creator of Ted Lasso, one of the biggest shows in the world right now. First, I must ask, are you a fan of soccer? Or I guess football, I should say.
I think I was, aside from the British writers and Brendan Hunt, who plays Coach Beard, I was the only one. I won a state championship in Connecticut as a soccer player at the age of 11, but I was the goalie, and I'm still not super clear on all the rules. So barely a fan.
You were the goalie because you knew that you just had to block the ball and stop it.
Yeah. You run out, grab the ball, tackle guys that are close to you, and then the coach says, "Good job." If they don't score, that's about the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, the show is based on these Premier League ads from like 8 years ago. So what was it like for you coming into a project with a character that's already been created and trying to turn the character into an ongoing TV show that's also totally different from those ads?
The huge plus was partnering up with Jason Sudeikis, because any writer will tell you that the ultimate cheat sheet is when you're, co-writing, co-creating with the person that can actually say lines out loud in the voice, and whether or not it works. It's like an instant test audience. The hardest aspect of it that I remember quite clearly was when you're trying to sell that show, especially if there's IP and things that people can watch. They weren't commercials. They were little promotional films. I thought they were really funny. I remember watching them as a comedy writer, but Jason was very loud and bombastic, and they were very kind of sketch based, and funny. And the hard thing was going around town trying to sell it, going, here's the IP that you've seen, and that's the character. This guy is going to be different than that, quieter. It's going to live in a more kind of emotional world and be about empathy and forgiveness and mentorship. And I don't think people could ever disconnect from that's the battle of IP. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Apple, because they were literally the only ones that bought it.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the reasons why I like the show is because I love sports movies, and I grew up with kids' sports movies, and they don't really make those anymore, which is very unfortunate. And I feel like you guys really injected the show with that vibe, that like underdog story with a lot of heart and interesting characters that you care about, even if they're, like villains. So why do you think there haven't been more sports TV shows?
I don't know. It was really interesting, because you hit on something we really cared about. Was we wanted to do our version of a sports movie. And the cool thing about being a writer, when you enter that world, I think all of us as writers often say, hey, I'm doing this and I don't want to do something that's already been done. And the second, I want to avoid the tropes. And the second you enter a sports movie world, every sports movie's been done. There's one that my wife digs about figure skating that I didn't know existed. It's called The Cutting Edge. He's an old hockey player from the mean streets, and she's a figure skater. There's one about arm wrestling. And so in a cool way, I think it forces you to embrace the tropes, in that style of storytelling, and then do your own spin on them. So if you have a villainous, female character that's trying to destroy the team, that might be one note in an hour and a half movie, but in a streaming series, you get to go, hey, what if we make people think she's a classic villain, but then kind of explore her character and cause people to feel empathy for how she got to this point, and then put her at a crossroads that maybe she goes deeper into darkness, maybe she goes back to the light. It's kind of fun when you embrace it. So in the second part of your question, I feel it's such a rich area. I don't know why it's not on television more. I expect it to be, now that we're in the streaming world. If you ask me, the main reason and the hardest thing for us is that making sports look real and authentic, which it causes people to either buy into the show or not buy into the show, is one of the trickier production things I've ever been involved in. And I would say, the first year we were okay at it, and we're lucky that some of the Premier League stadiums let us use their actual facilities so that we at least could do things in a big scope, but I mean, we all know you'll see a sports movie, and then if somebody throws poorly, or you're like, that dude can't skate, or even for me getting to work with Michael J. Fox, the amount of times he would joke about Teen Wolf and how he can't play basketball, when you're trying to do something real, it's really hard to create on the screen unless you have kind of you don't have the budgetary limitations that came with old normal network TV. And, in streaming, you have both the time and the wherewithal to hopefully make it look good.
Mm-hmm. Well, with Ted, the character, I think it's very easy to assume that he's this like aw shucks guy who's dumb and like simple-minded, but we see that he's very shrewd and observant and self-aware. Like he has a line in the show where he's like, people have underestimated me my entire life. So how do you go about building that depth in him?
It's you centered on something that was really important to us as TV writers, because I think, look, when you write television now, everybody loves to throw around the word meta, but every show is meta in a way. If you've been writing and doing it, as a viewer yourself, I love TV. My pet peeve when I meet young writers is if someone's like, I always ask, what's your favorite show? And like, oh, I actually don't watch a lot of TV. And I'm like, oh, please go do something else then. For God's sakes, you got to love it to do it. And so what was really interesting, on this note was we knew both in reviewers and with people checking this show out initially that everybody would think that they knew what the show was. Oh, he's a dumb, loud fish out of water. It's a rube and she's the villain. And when we wrote that line, people have been underestimating me my whole life. We also, in a snarky TV writer way, thought it was about the show, and this was before it was on, because, our biggest fear on a show like this is if you say you want to set people up with expectations and I know exactly what this is, and then surprise them when they don't. That's a tightrope to walk in television nowadays, because there's so many options of what to watch and what to look at. And if you had asked us beforehand, we thought there's a good chance that people would watch the first couple episodes of Ted Lasso, say, I've got this figured out and it's not for me, and maybe not stay around for what we were trying to do. So, as writers, as far as building characters with depth, I think that's great. There's a ton of different voices in the writer's room. I would be remiss if even though no writing breaks down on gender lines completely, but we had so many great, strong female writers that really championed the fact that, hey, the Rebecca, the owner, and, Keely, the young girlfriend, they can't just exist as in terms of being ciphers and whose boyfriend, girlfriend they are, and they should have their own friendship and their own journeys. Do you know what I mean? So I think we did enough character work ahead of time. And really kind of mapped out everybody's emotional journey for the year, and then crossed our fingers that people would stay around long enough to let their expectations be tweaked.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys, were such a huge hit just right out of the gate. You've been renewed for 2 more seasons. And do you now feel the pressure to deliver for season 2 and like avoid the so-called sophomore slumps? How do you guys, you guys are in production.
You know what? It's, I've been doing this for a long time. Look, it's a writer's room joke with me and the staff, and it'll be true or it's not. I'm like, everybody set your alarms for the Ted Lasso season 2 backlash. It's not that good, and that's just, I think it's just part of the game. And I think if I were ever giving advice on how to survive that thing is, if you're writing and doing shows completely, based on the response you're hoping you're going to get, you're not going to succeed, because you're going to be surprised both positively and negatively by it at different points. I will tell you that the thing I'm most confident in is partly because Jason came in with this in his head, and there's a great writing staff and the other creators, Joe Kelly and Brendan Hunt and us. We mapped out a 3-season story. Don't get me wrong, I'm a producer. I hope this show's on for 10 seasons. But this specific story, we mapped out how it was the beginning and the middle and the end of it. And we aren't veering from that. We liked it. We vetted it with each other. We really grinded hard on it the first season, and we're sticking with it. And so I think the mistake would be to go, oh, should the show change what we were trying to do and wanted to do because it's this popular? It's the same way if you try to fix a show by overhauling it completely because for some reason it hasn't hit a certain, that rarely works either, right? So I think for us, we like the storytelling we're doing. We're as insecure about it as all creative people are, and we cross our fingers and hope people dig it.
I think they will. So, well, Bill, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you back here in a little bit.
Sure. It's been fun. Been good interviews so far. I'm going to watch the next one too.
Well, thank you.